Hello and welcome to a buildingSMART webinar. This webinar is part of the buildingSMART Virtual Summit for Spring 2022. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tiina Perttula and I will be your moderator. Today's webinar details are on the screen. This is Infrastructure Room Session 1. We will be hearing from many members of the Infrastructure Room Steering Committee, including Tiina Perttula, the chair of the Infrastructure Room. I won't go through the whole agenda, but you can see that we will have a general introduction to what the Infrastructure Room is currently doing and planning for 2022, some feedback on roadmap workshops, and some feedback on the InfraOpenBIM session that took place in Lyon back in January. This webinar is scheduled to last for 2 hours, and at the end we will have a short question and answer session. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available in the replay section of the event within the next 24 hours. Before I hand over to our speakers, I'd like to remind you that your phone lines will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions or wish to make comments, please use the chat box in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. So any questions that you wish to raise, please add them into chat. I'd also like to bring to your attention the information that's on the screen now. buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent, and that standards that are developed do not favour any particular provider but are open, non-binding and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct. I'm now going to hand over to Tiina and Marek, who will start today's presentation. I'm adding your slides to the screen, Tiina.
Thank you, John. Just let me know when you can see my slides.
Yeah, we can see them there.
Perfect.
On the screen.
Thanks. So welcome all to this InfraRoom opening session in Virtual Summit 2022. My name is Tiina Perttula. I'm chair of the InfraRoom, and today we are having the presentation together with Marek Suchocki. Marek is the chair of the InfraRoom Project Steering Committee. So there is a short overview of what is happening in this virtual summit, and then also an overview of what has been done between the two summits in the project level and also in the room level. So once more, welcome. So shortly, our mission and scope, this has remained the same. So we want to combine, enhance and develop open standards for intelligent data, which enable process and data integration for infrastructure. And also the scope is the information exchange and process standards to support effective management of constructed built environment, and then linking and integrating across BIM and GIS. So in the very beginning, the GIS has played a role in kind of how to describe the infrastructure world with the different data perspective. So it's not only the BIM information, it's all type of information that we need in order to fulfill the requirements of the whole ecosystem. In the opening session, we have first presentation about the room activities. Then we have the roadmap update from InfraRoom roadmap workshops. And then a short update and conclusion from InfraBIM Open 2022 in Lyon that was held in the beginning of January. And as John mentioned, then we will have in the short Q&A session in the end of this InfraRoom opening. InfraRoom structure, we have the steering committee. I'm the chair of the InfraRoom. Then we have the technical leader, who is Phil Jackson. We nominate Phil to be a technical leader in the end of 2021. So in the last summit, this was still open position. Then the deputy chair for InfraRoom is Plume, and InfraRoom Project Steering Committee chair is Marek Suchocki. And then in the project steering committee, there is also the stakeholders and project managers from the various ongoing projects. Here you can see my InfraRoom steering committee colleagues and also the organization they are coming from. So the background is very kind of good, I should say so. So a lot of from different backgrounds. We have consultants, we have the infra owners, we have the universities, we have the contractors, and we have the software vendors. So kind of very good knowledge about the future demands from very different perspective. And also we have support from buildingSMART International. With the orange is the project that has been finalized under the InfraRoom. So we have the alignment, common schema, bridge and road. Then partly ongoing project or part of this set is also ports and waterways, and tunnel is currently running, but it should be finalized quite soon now. And with the alignment project, we had the separate alignment deployment project, but together we are now calling these orange or light orange projects IFC 4.3 deployment. And we have heard about the project on Monday opening session, and also there will be a more technical session later on in this week. Then a little bit about the different roles. So as I mentioned, we have the chair, deputy chair, technical leader, and the project steering committee chair. But then we do have the roadmap committee, and today we will have the presentation from them. So Plume, Jürgen Litsch, Tristan McDonnell, and Neidenström are part of the roadmap committee inside the InfraRoom steering committee. Then the communication is done by Tristan McDonnell. So we have the newsletters and we collect information to be shared in LinkedIn profiles and also in the BSI newsletters regularly, at least twice per year after the summits, and if needed more often. For example, if we are looking for funding or some project starts are going to happen, and lately we have been advertised to this local chapter workshop that we heard more about in the next presentation. Then the liaison with the railway room is done by Marion Senkwein. So Marion has the good knowledge about the both domains, so the rail and the infra overall. And then we do have the ISO liaison with Christophe Castaing. So ISO liaison is extremely important for us, especially this year, because the IFC 4.3 is now delivered to the ISO process. So we are monitoring regularly the situation in the process in our steering committee meetings. About the roadmap. So this has been delivered in 2019 in the first place, InfraRoom roadmap. And there is a many ongoing streamlines. In the 2019, there was still this domain-based project up and running, and they was finalized in 2020. And after 2020, we start the IFC 4.3 deployment that we delivered to the that was delivered in the October 2021 as a final standard. And now in 2022, it has been put forward to the ISO process. But this kind of 4-year roadmap has now kind of close to end. And for the next steps, we are planning that we are revising the roadmap somewhere in the autumn, or at least starting the process for revising this and checking what needs to be continued. We have noticed already that the streamlines are quite right. So these future project white papers, object libraries, linked data, BSDDs, SEN and ISO liaison, OGC liaison, BSI liaison, and especially the industry communication. And industry communication is now something that we are focusing on for the coming years, because if the implementation 4.3, we need to make sure that we are kind of doing that part as good as possible, and the whole industry is needed for the implementation for IFC 4.3. And as I mentioned, we do have some visibility for the next year also. So the ISO process together, it takes approximately 1 year. So in the beginning of 2023, so the first quarter, I almost can say that we will have the ISO standard ready with the infra extension, or published with the infra extension, and then kind of what happens after that is the implementation period with very much engagement with the industry. But then maybe after 2023, we don't have that good visibility for the coming project. We have some topics already that Marek will present you in later in this presentation, that what have been discussed already, but they are kind of in the pre-project phase. So there is preliminary maybe project plan, but not funding collected yet, and that's one part of our task as a steering committee, to then start the call for participants and call for funding for the future IFC project too. So that's the reason why these coming years are in gray. So in the autumn we will revise this roadmap, and then have maybe a little bit better visibility in the end of 2025. Other room activities, we have the newsletters. The roadmap is now kind of ongoing work. Then there is a project called Integrated Digital Built Environment, IDBE, that is done together with the OGC, and that's how we kind of make sure that we have the ongoing liaison and communication with them. Then the standardization, especially in the European level, is now TC 442 cooperation, that there is a kind of specific work package that are very much related what we are doing in buildingSMART International. And we do have also some of our steering committee members are also part of those different working groups under the TC 442. So we then have at least good understanding that where are the points where we need to influence as an infrastructure room. Mainly some of the rooms are very building specific, and then to get the good understanding where we need to influence is very crucial for us. And then there is a lot of BSI room cooperation with other buildingSMART International room. So there are some initiatives under the building room, for example, that could be interesting for us as a infra room. And of course, maybe the one room that needs to mention here all the time is the railway room. So together with the railway room, we are now preparing the 4.3 and finalizing the MVDs, for example. And then there is, of course, all the time other activities in the buildingSMART International, like modernization of IFC and this type of project that, of course, influence us as an infra room, and we need to be aware of those too. So a lot of kind of project in many different level, and try to cooperate with others when it's beneficial and important for us too. Then about the agenda in this virtual summit, we will have our own session after this opening session. So they are the infrastructure room session 2A with IFC tunnel, and infrastructure room session 2B with the IFC tunnel expert panel session. But then we do have the joint session with the railway room, and it's IFC 4.3 expert panel, phase 2 model view definition, and it's more detailed, the alignment based reference view. Then there might be some interesting project for infra room as well. As I mentioned, we cooperate with the other rooms, and in the building room there is a project or initiative about the facility management project, and there will be an update from the project later today. And that could be maybe a good point where we can collaborate more in maybe in infra it's more maybe the asset management, but in building it's called facility management, and there is some topics for sure that are overlapping a little bit. So maybe at least the top level we could share some common ideas, and then maybe in the domain level they are then separated, but we will have more detailed information later today. And then under the railway room, there will be tomorrow the phase 2 project finalization for IFC Rail. So that could be interesting for some of the audience too. But then I will hand over to Marek, and he will tell you more detailed about the ongoing project in infra and rail, and then some future ideas too.
Thank you very much, Tiina. If you can do a quick click to open my first slide. So this really covers the work that has been done between the infrastructure room and railway room over the past 3 to 4 years. I've been involved myself with buildingSMART and previously the International Alliance for Interoperability for approaching 25 years. And I will say hand on heart that this has been probably the most successful cooperation between different global players, members of the supply chain, the owner community and software vendors, looking at delivering comprehensive and appropriate schemas for the different domains covered in IFC 4.3, so bridges, roads, ports and waterways, rail, and aspects such as drainage and common elements such as embankments and so forth. The unfortunate pandemic that we've been suffering has perhaps delayed the work a little bit, as shown by Tiina's roadmap slides in terms of the ambition we had. But I think the actual end result is a positive, because we've now got schemas that have been agreed by a wider community as being appropriate to service exchanges during project development, but also particularly of interest in terms of asset data handover to the owners for the operational phase of assets. So this is the work that has been done. And the next phase of work, if you click once, please, Tiina, and one more click, is the model view definition development. This project is closing its first phase of work now, which is delivering the in-scope exchanges and their requirements to then move into the current phase that will be developing the actual detail of the MVDs. There will be more about this work later in the summit, so please do attend the MVD session, because this is a prelude to actually making IFC 4.3 available in software. We need to have confirmed basic MVDs in order to certify software that it can deliver consistent, reliable import and export. If you can do one more click and immediately do 2 clicks, please. So we have here an example of why this model view definition work is very important. Traditionally, particularly from the vertical constructional buildings concepts, we talk about coordinate-based referencing. For those of us who are civil engineers, it's actually not appropriate. We tend to talk in the terms of alignments and chainages. And so in order to make a successful exchange and a relevant exchange for the sector, we also need to be able to deliver information based on alignment referencing, as opposed to purely through coordinate-based referencing. So 2 of the core MVDs that are being explored are, of course, to maintain a coordinate-based approach, but also this alignment-based approach, as well as domain-specific MVDs. But hopefully you understand that there is a very, very clear distinction between how civil engineers reference information and those who are perhaps more familiar with the building sector. So that work is ongoing, and there will be more presented on this, and I think partly to do with the joint session with the railway room that Tiina referred to. Another click, please, Tiina. So let's look at some other activities that are underway or due to start in the near future. So first click, please. If you can do just 2 quick clicks as well. So Tiina mentioned ISO. Now, ISO is important to us because if we can make IFC 4.3 certified as an ISO standard, and effectively it will be version 3 of ISO 16739, which is currently focused on IFC 4, and previously in the first incarnation as IFC 2x3, then it's not just important because it's an ISO standard. The reason that's important is because the customer base can actually specify delivery to ISO 16739 2023. So the work is already being passed by the member standards bodies as being appropriate, and it's now going through the more complicated and perhaps complex review to become the formalized ISO standard, which we expect to happen next year. Our InfraRoom colleague Christophe Castaing is leading that work, and we'll be able to explain more. I believe there is also some information coming during this summit on this, but the important thing is that at some point next year, IFC 4.3 will be a certified ISO standard, and that means that people such as the transport agencies can actually say, please deliver to ISO 16739 as a consistent data handover. So I think this is a really important development. Another click, please, Tina. So IFC Tunnel is a work in progress, and there are 2 sessions that Tina mentioned already explaining a lot more about IFC Tunnel during this summit. Importantly, IFC Tunnel isn't included in 4.3, but will be released as IFC 4.4, so an update due hopefully this summer. You can see some of the work packages that are being covered, but safe to say that this is a project that is currently in progress as part of the InfraRoom. It is very well run by Michelle Reeves, who will be presenting on this later. So do attend the session to find out where that work is at and the hopeful deliverables. Another click, please. Tina did also mention that there is a intention to do a FMHEM, so FM handover for equipment maintenance update. This work is being led from the building room, but actually, interestingly, is actually seeking to incorporate the domains covered by IFC 4.3. So our infrastructure and rail side, because within what those of you who are familiar with COBE, this is to some extent a further development of COBE to incorporate new developments as well as this infrastructure world more effectively. So as an InfraRoom, we will participate actively along with the railway room, the building room, and potentially other rooms such as airports. So this work is very much in its infancy, but is drawing on a technical community from experts around the globe who will seek to ensure that the scope is correct and that the work is delivered according to the needs of the industry sectors. Another click, please, Tina. We are also potentially going to be starting a project that was proposed back in 2020 on landscaping and urban planning. This would be another collaborative effort with the building room and potentially others, looking to cover missing schema aspects because the data model currently doesn't incorporate enough around the domain of landscaping and urban planning. So that is a to be decided when it might start, but certainly is one that the InfraRoom steering committee is keen to see progress. Another click, please, Tina. And then the last thing I'm going to cover is that there has been a proposal for what's called Ports and Waterways Phase 2, but actually is going to be rebranded IFC Maritime. And you can see the asset types that are intended to be covered and the processes associated with them. This is a very large potential project. So in order to deliver it, we must make sure that the resources are available. So we want to see work such as IFC Tunnel and the MVD initiative completed before we can draw on the experts needed to ensure that this project is delivered. It is a very valid project, and if there are people out there in the community wishing to participate, then please do approach the InfraRoom, because we really do need your input to make sure that this work can be executed correctly. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Tina to conclude this opening part of this IR1 session. You're on mute, Tina.
Sorry, thanks, Marek. Now can you hear me? Yes, I think so. So thank you, Marek. I don't have any more slides in the deck. So thank you all. And now I will hand over to Jürgen and and to Tim and to Tristan for the next session or the next presentation, that it's for the roadmap update.
Thanks, Tiina. Right, here we go. Welcome to us. Welcome to this session on the infrastructure roadmap, presented to you by the Infrastructure Room. My name is Tristan McDonnell, and I'll be presenting alongside Jürgen Litsch, Tiina Perttula, and Jim Plume. Today we'll provide a brief recap of the roadmap. We'll summarise the outcomes from 2 workshops we've held over the past year, one in Germany, one in Finland, and we'll finish with the proposed next steps and targets for the year ahead. In past, well, as Tiina mentioned earlier, in past summits, we've presented our ambition to support the infrastructure sector in future, which we have captured as our Infrastructure Room roadmap. We published our roadmap in 2020. This image you'll have seen from Tiina's presentation, but hopefully from previous summits as well. This sets out where we were as current state and where we want to be as future state. Some progress has been made over the past years, but the pandemic has meant progress has been impeded somewhat. As a recap, we have set out our vision for the future state as a series of goals, which include supporting the infrastructure sector by achieving the ability to create open, shareable information through the full life cycle of infrastructure projects, supporting the realization of the digital twin, achieving wide adoption of IFC across the breadth of our sector, and achieving the integration and adoption of worldwide standards such as ISO, CEN, OGC, and W3C. We have identified activities to help us achieve these goals. We are committed to realising the roadmap for infrastructure, and to achieve our ambition, we've identified 8 work streams. These are as follows, as shown on this slide. Number 1, completing and deploying ongoing projects. IFC 4.3 is nearing conclusion, as you've heard about this morning. Number 2, IFC infrastructure future requirements. We have and continue to engage with our community to understand the industry's needs and priorities. Number 3, white paper and guidance. In October 2020, we prepared and published a white paper on current challenges and what we should focus on. There will be a need for further white papers and guidance as the roadmap is realised. Number 4, object type, libraries, ontologies, and linked data. This is being progressed in conjunction with CEN 442 Working Group 4. Number 5, we continue to liaise with relevant industry bodies, as Marek talked about earlier, including CEN, the European Committee for Standardization, ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, and other standards liaisons. Number 6, Open Geospatial Consortium liaison continues. Number 7, BSI liaison, an overall approach and technical requirements. As Tiina mentions, we have now identified a technical lead for the Infrastructure Room to support us in realising the roadmap. And number 8, industry communication. We have presented at previous summits on the roadmap and kept our community up to date with the progress through newsletters. We have concluded a survey to gather intel from the community, and we are in the process of facilitating workshops in conjunction with our BSI chapters to explore the needs of the sector further. 2 of these workshops have been held so far, and you'll hear about the outcomes today. The first of these workshops was held in Germany, which Jürgen will now tell you about.
Hello together, welcome to the results of the German workshop that took place in November last year in Fulda, and I will present you the results and the method we choose. So we had participants 23, and this came from the different stakeholders in Germany. So as you see, we have owners, designer companies, construction companies, IT companies, universities, consultants, and also organizations on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Digital and Transport. So every stakeholder was on board, and we started our workshop. So we divided this 23 people in 3 groups. What was important that every stakeholder was participant of every group, and the group works in 1.5 hours on the topics, and one participant per group presents at the end the result in the plenum that was discussed, and we finalized and prioritized the issues that came up in the discussion of the 3 work groups. What was the themes? First one was EFC infrastructure, what is missing, what are the next important steps. Then white papers, do we need other guidance, more guidance, then object type libraries, what is missing, what are our next priorities, how does this fit in the local and national needs, and last but not least the industry communication. How can we improve our communication, buildingSMART International, to all the stakeholders worldwide? As method, we choose the rose, thorn and bud method. It's a good thing to help a group to classify their results in the good things, bad things and new ideas. So, and here are the results of our workshop. For EFC and class and characteristics, you see here the results prioritized by the whole group after discussion in the plenum. So some of this have 8 and 9 points, others have only 1 point. And we did this for EFC, class and characteristic, and we did it also for white papers and communication. And now you see here the summary of the results. For EFC, one main thing is EFC and GIS, 9 points. How should the transition from EFC to GIS take place? What about the georeferencing? What about the characteristic databases for GIS? And there's also a need for model view definition for the GIS use case. EFC and operation phase. The use case has to be defined. And we should also look on other systems like CAFM Connect, Exchange EFC, Design to Design 8 points. There's a need that models in authoring systems must be edible, and this in for geometrics and also for semantics informations. But what is included in the EFC scheme? Only geometry or also semantics? To what extent should the semantics be specified? And what about the classes and characteristics, databases? Who, when, and how will they be defined? We come to the classes and characteristics. There's also a main use case, the operational phase. There's a need for appropriate classes and characteristics for the defined use cases. And we need the interdisciplinary transport harmonization for these classes and characteristics. White papers and communication. I put both topics together, so the thorn is transport communication, channel and methods are missing. And how is the international and national approach coordinated? And the but is, we are sure there's a lot of information, but where can we find it? And the idea is build up something like a knowledge Tetris. So this was the results from the German workshop for the roadmap buildingSMART international infrastructure.
And then I will introduce you the outcome of the workshop from Finland that was held in the end of January. So the methodology was the kind of that we did have the open invitation in the buildingSMART Finland member organization. It was the online event. It was supposed to be in the beginning the live event, but because of the COVID variant, we needed to switch off it to the online event, and then we shortened the time for 3 hours because it's very hard to have the full day workshop. We had together approximately 40 participants. And then we start with the session or the workshop session with the presentation about what is IFC 4.3, what does it cover, and then about a little bit the kind of activities in the buildingSMART International, so that the audience or the participants understand the structures and the content for the workshop. Next slide, please. And next, yes, thanks. So the objective of the event was the discussion and exchange the ideas. So it was not only mentioned to be kind of that we are telling about the IFC 4.3, but we wanted to the participants to actively participate as good as they can in this kind of virtual event. And then there, what was also kind of tell to the participants that especially the ideas are very wanted and valued, and no one needs to be the expert about the IFC 4.3. So this was not only for kind of the IFC experts, because we don't have that many actually IFC experts, but this is especially for the kind of domain experts coming from the different infrastructure fields, that if they had any concerns or questions related to IFC 4.3, this was exactly the place where those could be asked. Next slide, thanks. The overall agenda for the workshop was here. So first we had this common presentation from Tarmo Savolainen, from myself, and then for Juha Hyvärinen for the kind of the covering the most crucial parts and giving the participants background information and put everybody to the same level of knowledge for what is IFC 4.3 coming, or what it will bring to when it has been implemented perfectly or as a whole after it has become the ISO standards, to a little bit be more prepared for possible future demands, so that everybody understand that what they even could be the demands in the future. But then after a short break, we divided for 3 different groups, and in those groups we had the 2 different work sessions. So it was the part 1 and the part 2, and the group work totally took 1 hour. And after the group work, we had the open kind of wrap up and discussion about the findings for the different groups. Next slide. Here are the facilitators for the working group. So Jari Kainovaara, he is the chair of buildingSMART Finland Infra Standardization Group. Then I was chairing one group, so I'm working in the buildingSMART Finland in the charge of in the chair of the Infra Development Group. And then Marion Senkvain, she is the chairwoman of the buildingSMART Finland Infra Room or Infra Business Group. So we were chairing those kind of small working groups. Next slide, please. The topics were different in each group. So first group was looking closely about the questions. What does IFC 4.3 raise? What is needed in the first step? Then the second step was to answer the question that if what is needed that we can answer to the question that was raised in the first step. And then the third question for the first group was that can we influence to those ourselves? So there is certainly some questions that we can't be influenced at the moment as a buildingSMART Finland. That could be because of, for example, if it's related to emissions or greenhouse gas, then we need some other organization or community to work with us. So then we need to seek for wider kind of collaboration with maybe other standardization groups. Then the second group was focusing on the kind of things that IFC 4.3 will bring. And then the second step for them was to answer the question that how we can realize these opportunities identified in the first step. And then the third step was the same, that is it the kind of opportunity that we as a buildingSMART Finland can influence ourselves, or if it's something that we need support from other organizations too. It could be, like I mentioned in the first group, that may be CO2 databases or other activities related to hold built environment. And the last group was looking closely about the risks that maybe that are related to the implementation of IFC 4.3 and how we can prevent these risks from materializing. And then the same question for the last group too, that is it the kind of risk that we can influence it ourselves, or if we want to mitigate it, does we need help for somebody else? But trying to have some concrete ideas also that what we can do as a buildingSMART Finland alone, and when we need the help from all of the industry. Next slide. Here is just an overview. We did use the Miro board as a virtual this board, and have the different type of post-it notes there, and we had 3 groups and really different kind of outcome from the groups. So the working method was kind of group themselves could choose the best method for them, that if they wanted to use some arrows or then just write more text, or it could be chosen by the working group by itself. Next slide, thanks. But then the main findings from the workshop. So the questions that was kind of concerns about the IFC 4.3, which was raised. There are just a few listed here, but the first question was that could IFC replace the paper as a archiving kind of methodology in the future? This is of course something that we cannot answer by ourselves, that we need to work together, for example, the different ministries, and then we have to have some changes to the law as well. So for example, IFC needs to be recognized as a one archiving format or standard in the future. Now there is some PDF formats that are approved for archiving systems, but in the future there has to be IFC 2. But this is something that we need to have help from other parties in Finland. Then the question was also that what will happen to the InfraModel, and this is very specific in Finland. So we have been using that for transferring data, especially with the machine guidance system. And if IFC will come, then how we will map IFC and InfraModel and see that if we can use maybe IFC more in the future. And for example, there is some definition that needs to defined in national level more detailed. For example, the traffic management was recognized that's the part that we have been not touching that much. So we have covering maybe all the large elements, but then when we go to the more detailed object level, then this is of course some domain that needs to be take part in our further conversation. But then in the second group, the question was that what does IFC 4.3 bring? And then of course it's the possibility to be more coherent. It's also allow process to be streamlined, so maybe reducing of multiple different programs. And also, does it act as a data repository? Is it possible to combining and managing data from multiple IFCs or other sources? So this is kind of the question maybe in the future, that there will be data from many different sources in the future, and if we have a standardized way for some information, IFC-based information, then this could be bring us a lot of possibilities and benefits in the future. The next slide, please. Then there is a happy participants in one of the workshop session. Next one, please. Thanks.
Thanks, Tiina. This is Jim Plume speaking now. I had the rather unenviable task of trying to summarise what came out of the 2 workshops we've run so far. And because I wasn't a participant in either workshop, I could do that only by looking at basically the slides you've just seen, which reported the outcomes of the workshop. So I was trying to pull that together and thinking about what are the implications of these workshops for the infra room and our strategy going forward, our roadmap. So the first thing I looked for were issues that involve the development of IFC for infrastructure. In other words, what are the next steps? What are the things that haven't yet been addressed based on the input or the discussion from these workshops? And I've come up with a few here, not in any particular order, but one of the interesting ones, for example, was a whole ocean of points as entities, which is very important in surveying. In fact, it's also important that lines are also represented, and we need to think about how those sorts of entities can be managed within an IFC context. We've already seen reference to the integration of IFC to or with GIS data sets, and I saw that as being an important outcome for further investigation and exploration from the infra room. Another issue that came up was 3D, 4D BIM and its implications for infrastructure. I don't think we've really looked at that as yet, and so that's something which we can consider as a possible topic. An important one was considering the needs of the operational phase of an infrastructure project. That came up in both workshops, as I recall, but it's really important that we start to think about beyond just the design, not just the design, planning and delivery of infrastructure, but of course its operational phase is critically important. The issue of design to design transfer support came up and was raised, and that's an important question for us to ask, because what is the role of IFC in transferring data within the infrastructure domain between software that supports the design process, and should there be barriers there? Should we be striving to achieve in that kind of transfer? And that's critically important and something which we need to take on board. Another one was the considering data requirements for data exchange across transport modes. So how do you obviously all transport modes are interconnected, and we need to be able to manage the information requirements to support the data exchange across those different modes and actually get them singing together, as it were, from the same BIM sheet. And finally, the need, the other one I identified, need for better understanding the role of the BSDD in relation to IFC. BSDD has undergone a lot of maturity and development over the last couple of years while we've been doing this work on infrastructure, and we now need to look very seriously at how where it sits within the adoption of IFC for infrastructure. So they seem to be the main issues that came out. There may have been others that I missed, because as I say, I wasn't a participant. I was working from the notes. Thanks. Next one. Next slide. The other one that came out as a recurring theme across workshops was the need for better communication. And I interpreted that to some extent to be related to education on IFC. There is a need for the community, our community within the built environment, to have a better understanding and to, particularly in the infrastructure space, because the adoption of IFC and the processes that relate to the use of IFC and data exchange aren't well understood across infrastructure generally, and that needs to be addressed. So the scope and structure of IFC, how it can be used, and we need to think about how we can educate our sector, or our sectors, plural, in that space. Part of that is publicising success stories, encourage industry to learn from experience. There's been some remarkably good work done globally. I mean, I can speak from an Australian perspective, but there's been a lot of success stories within Australia in infrastructure, and I know that's true across sectors internationally. And so we need to learn from that experience. We've already mentioned the next few, we've actually covered it previously, but they come out as important in communication space as well. So understanding and explaining the relationship between IFC and GIS data, and actually moving data across those domains. And we've already talked about georeferencing and geo-MVDs and so on. So how do we really tackle that? We talk about it a lot, but there's some really serious issues facing us there. Even just one of the issues that comes up repeatedly, which is the coordinate systems. And we alluded to that earlier in the presentation. But we measure the built environment in different ways, using different coordinate systems in IFC and GIS and in infrastructure, and we need to think about how to integrate that. Another one came up was how identifying how IFC can be used in the operational phase. So matching classes and property requirements and use cases, and the data transition from construction to operation. I see the whole MVD, the move from delivery through providing data to support asset management or facilities management as a critically important area, and there's been some good foundation work being done within the building room as something which we need to pick up energetically as we apply those lessons and that knowledge and understanding to the infrastructure space. You mentioned design exchange. I think that's a major challenge for us, and we need to think about how to do that. And there is also a need for a better understanding of BSPD, as I mentioned a moment ago. So they seem to be the main takeaways from the two workshops we've run so far. Next slide, thank you. The other thing that I wanted to mention just briefly, I don't want to stay on the slide for too long, but there were related workshop discussion topics. So the expected impact of IFC4 was a issue raised within both workshops and generated a lot of discussion. And that doesn't tell us much about our responses in infra-room, but we need to be aware of those things, and they need to be addressed generally at the local level, the national level. The implementation risks and mitigation that became a major theme, I think, in the Finnish workshop. That requires they talked about the effective rollout of IFC. How do we manage that through the public sector and through industry leaders and so on, and the loss of existing digital processes. So moving from manual processes, even drawing-based processes, to a model-based exchange and so on. They're really big challenges and need to be addressed generally at the local level. They become national issues, but I guess I'm sure that we have a role to play in guiding that kind of discussion from within the infra room. And the other topic that came up in both workshops was national strategies to take advantage of the BSI work. So one of the roles of these workshops is to help national chapters to come to terms with what they can do at a national level, a local national level, in order to take advantage and to promote the BSI work. So next slide. This takes me to next steps. And I think there are three areas that we need to talk about. We currently have three workshops that are currently in discussion or /planning, some in very early discussion, but we do need to, these are workshops that are already sort of being discussed and planned at some level, and so Italy, UK and Ireland and Australasia. But there's a very important opportunity then for other chapters to host local roadmap workshops. And if there's any takeaway from this segment of our opening session at the summit, it's to challenge other chapters around the world to think about how, whether it's worth hosting a local workshop. We'd certainly love to get the input from those local workshops as we go forward. And so if you are representing a local chapter, involved in a local chapter, then please encourage your members to think about hosting a local workshop. It can be virtual, can be face-to-face as we move beyond the current constraints of the pandemic. But if you are interested or want more information, then Jürgen, his email address is there, or John Proctor, are both good contacts to get onto, and they will guide you through that process and help you get started. We have a lot of resources available for workshops. As you saw from the two we've already run, they're uniquely different. They were devised locally and support the local needs, and that will always be true, but we do have resources to help you get started. So if you represent a local chapter, then please get in touch. And finally, just to give ourselves a deadline, so that we all need deadlines in order to deliver things. And so it's really important for us in the infrastructure and steering committee to commit to reporting the workshop results collectively at the upcoming summit in October, which I think is going to be in Montreal, we hope, and we hope it's going to be a face-to-face one. And also it's our commitment to deliver a revised InfraRIM roadmap, as Tristan indicated at the beginning. So we want to commit ourselves to that, and we look forward to having some further discussion around this at the next summit. But of course, we're open to questions and answers as we go forward. Thank you, Tristan. That's all from me.
Thank you very much for the update on the roadmap workshops. That was excellent from Tristan, Jim, Jürgen and Tiina. I'm going to invite Christophe and Anna to join us. We're up to section 3 of our agenda today, and Christophe and Anna are going to be providing some feedback from the event that took place in January in Lyon, the InfraBIM Open. So let me bring you onto the stream.
Christophe speaking, you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Christophe.
Okay, so normally it's Anna to drive the presentation.
I don't think Anna's going to be with us, actually, Christophe. I think
Okay. So,
but we can see your slides. They look good.
Okay. So thank you very much, and sorry because I wanted to have Anna with me. Just we wanted to come back to the event we organized in France, in Lyon, in the 10 and 12 of January this year, after two postponing due to the COVID. First of all, I want to remind to everybody that InfraBIM Open was created by the Finland chapter 3 years ago, something like that, or maybe 4 years ago. And 2 years ago, it was decided commonly between the Finnish chapter and mine in France, and the French chapter, the buildingSMART French chapter, to organize the InfraBIM Open for this time in France. And what I want to underline is it was a very great pleasure. And sorry, I have middle of. Yes, it was a very great pleasure and honor to organize that commonly with Finland, and there is a good mood and a good feeling together to co-organize that. So we succeed even with the COVID impact to maintain this event in the beginning of January with a hybrid organization with 475 attendees on site, including 178 people online to monitor to follow the presentation. We have a very positive feedback from the attendees about the location, the catering, and what is more important about friendship and presentation. Just to say that the next event will be in Finland on the beginning of 2023, and it was already decided commonly with Finland and France to reorganize this event in France in 2024. Just to mention that it was very successful in terms of continuity and sponsoring, a very heavy sponsoring, very interesting and very positive, with 22 sponsors, and with the presentation from a common presentation about PSI and OGC about a key event regarding geotechnical project. During the opening section, 2 keynotes about the life cycle and low carbon strategy, and a roundtable about this strategy, low carbon, with different people arriving from Finland, from France, and different organizations for that. 65 presentations on different sessions, including sponsoring, and a very interesting closing session with the survey about TC44.2 about the implementation of BIM in Europe, and with key lessons to learn from that, and a roundtable about BIM policies in Europe, coming back to that, because there is some impact about the next step. To underline that all of the presentations are still available on the BRELA platform, and it's still open for the people register on this event to reorganize event when they want. For instance, in France, we are going to organize a monthly event with some presentation available on this BRELA presentation, and you have the flashcard to be able to connect on that. To be noted that what I mentioned is a geotech project co-lead by buildingSMART and OGC about connected to IFC Tunnel project. It's a very important event in terms of federation of model, not only IFC, but the connection of IFC with the GeoScienceML model, and to share semantics through BSDD or W3C 3C protocol, and the discussion are open, and the project is growing very, very strongly. And you can report. I think that Michel will be report on that during his presentation. We have a very strong, interesting presentation with Hervé about the low carbon strategy in Europe, and a co-strategy between Europe and China about this aspect. And I want to underline the very interesting roundtable about the different European policy about deploying BIM for infra in Europe, co-chaired by Jansa and Suel Subra from the European BIM Task Group, with the presentation of Elektra Pepadaki from DigiGrow. And DigiGrow, for the people who are not aware, is the general direction for organizing the market for big group and SMEs in Europe. And we have also something I want to underline: the report done by Marion about the Finland policy. In terms of the next step, I want to underline 2 things. I already mentioned the BSI and UGC project on geotech, with the call for participation, and the implementation will be done commonly with IFC Tunnel during this year. But I want to really underline what's happened after the IBO meeting, and there's some link with the discussion with the president discussion about the roadmap for InfraRoom, about the InfraRoom, that DigiGrow has invited us to participate to a dedicated meeting coming from IBO, and we have people from Finland, France, Italy, and Germany, and Jan, Sarah, participating to that, a 1 hour and 1.5 hours discussion about what is the impact about the deployment of IFC 4.3 on the policy and procurement policy in Europe. It was very interesting about the impact about how to introduce the open BIM in the terms of reference in the procurement process and documentation, and what is the impact of that on the low carbon strategy in Europe. And I want to recommend the report mentioned here about the requirements coming from Europe to modifying the what is said, the building the construction ecosystem. The digital ecosystem of construction in Europe. It's really a requirement to move on and to check what is the impact of IC 4.3 in the European policy. It's a way to answer to your question about national regulation to deploy BIM, and I think that we can use the Europe and the Commission, European Committee to push or to pull all of the European country to move on this issue. I don't know, Anna, are you there?
Yes, I'm sorry for the delay.
So you're just in time. So it's your slides.
Yeah, thank you.
So maybe it's up to you. You can share your screen, or you say to me to move on with my screen. It's up to you.
Yeah, but you can continue. So please change the slide. Yes.
Yes, I'm going to change the slide under your direction.
Yeah, perfect. So we would like to give you a quick overview of some of the presentations from IBO. So at the conference, a lot of good examples of various projects adopting open standards were shared. And I would like to highlight a few of these to show the range of development now happening in the industry. All presentations are available at the Ready platform using your previous login to access. So the BIM basis infra was presented by Paulus Eckhard. It's showing the collaboration is better if the information on which we build is exchangeable, structured, complete, and reusable. The BIM basis IDS provides guidance and tips for the structured and unambiguous exchange of information in the construction industry. Paulus, he explains the BIM-based ILS and the importance of a common language, keeping it simple and focusing on the why, how, and what. Next session.
No, sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. You can change the slide.
It's better like this way. Let's go now.
Yeah, yes. For the next session, I would like to highlight a presentation from Akka Software. This presentation showcased cutting-edge technology available to support open BIM workflows. The industry is moving forward and requirements are changing. Now BIM is demanded and the IFC standard is an important key component. Michelangelo is showing how these new requirements are implemented and how models can be generated using the IFC standard. It's very interesting to see how metadata and Excel-based alignments is used to create detailed 3D models, and also how these can be generated and multiplied to automate the design. Also, the use of an open CDE as a single source of truth is an important piece of the puzzle to create the baseline for the communication in a project. The presentation contains good conclusions and interesting use cases and workflows are presented. You can go for the next one. The Hampton Road Bridge and Tunnel project, it's a massive infrastructure project. The client required everything to be modeled in 3D. Many issues have been faced, and some of these were actually due to the lack of standardization in the current infrastructure industry. The need of a structured standardization for BIM in infrastructure is highlighted in this presentation, and it demonstrates the current software limitations that exist in the market and how to overcome them. Solutions are presented, how it was implemented, and also what should exist to facilitate future implementation. A very comprehensive summary of industry needs required to improve our current workflows. It also showcases what you can actually achieve when you get the pieces together. And again, note that all these presentations are available in the platform Brella. So here you can use your previous account to go back and to check everything that was presented during the IBO. Next slide, please.
This one is just to introduce one of the presentations done by IBO will be available on tomorrow on the technical summit about the question of data dictionary and so on, which is linked also with the presentation with Saka about how to use the data dictionary in the project and the added value of the data dictionary, because usually what we have extracted in terms of information coming from the authoring tools becoming something much more detailed in terms of properties and to define the project and so on. And I recommend to have to go in the technical summit on tomorrow with a presentation done by people by French people about that. It's really something important in the way to implement IC 4.3, which is not only the question of the schemer we have developed, but also we are really working about technical issue regarding properties, performance, and so on. So it's not only 3D now. We are really working about the technical specification, bill of quantities, and so on. Up to you, Anna.
Yeah, thank you. The InfraBIM Open 2021, it showcased multiple examples of projects that successfully managed to implement open standards across different stages, making information accessible and transparent. It's very nice to see the expansion of open standards being implemented and all different solutions now adopted and applied. The industry, and I think especially the infrastructure industry, is moving forward, and new standards will improve and make it easier to communicate and to create new success stories. And the best success really do come when you share your experience. This is something that Philippe Testard spoke about, and his spotless quote completed the presentation regarding the Hampton Road Bridge and Tunnel project. So, looking forward on the next InfraBIM Open in Tampere 2023.
Yes, I have nothing to add, and again, I want to say that I was very proud. It was a very friendship preparation, a very good collaboration between France and Finland. And what is more important maybe than that, but it's related to that the quality of discussion we have with the DG Grow and DG Claim in Europe is really coming from this success of this kind of story and organization, and is really something coming back to the European Commission authority, and something changing in Europe due to that. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, Christophe and Anna. Thank you for your presentation there. We have a comment that came in during your presentation on InfraBIM Open from Tarmo. Tarmo says, it's on the screen, Christophe, on behalf of BS Finland, a big thank you for buildingSMART France for the great InfraBIM Open in Lyon. It was great to be in the live seminar after a while in beautiful Lyon. You and your team made absolutely great work in very challenging COVID times. Merci, Kiltos. And there's also a reminder from Tarmo of the next InfraBIM Open that you were just referring to as well in 2023, something to look forward to. I'm going to bring the infrastructure committee team back in just to deal with a couple of comments and questions. So welcome back. Thank you very much for the presentation today. And we have a question that came in here. Didn't come through the chat, but came in separately. This question is, as IFC and OpenBIM standards become more mature, a key need is to make them more accessible for industry to use. Developing standards is important, but making them available to users is the end game. Does the infrastructure room have a view on how we might make standards easier to use? Don't know who wants to have a go at that particular question. Jim, did you want to comment?
I can comment. I mean, Sergey responded in an appropriate way. The issue is the standard, IFC standard, is not for end users to access directly. It's accessed through software. And so software have to implement the standard and the exchange of data in and out of the software tools in order to make it accessible to end users. And that's really the short answer here. So what we are working very hard to do as we move toward the ISO release of the standard is to encourage software vendors to implement exchange within the context of their own tools and what those tools deliver for the industry, and taking advantage of the interoperability question. I think Marek probably is a good position to respond to this as well.
Yes, no, thanks, Jim. I think one of the issues is recognition of applicability of IFC, and certainly as a software vendor representative, we have been deeply involved from the outset in IFC 4.3 and IFC 4.1 beforehand. So we see value in ensuring that we support it wherever practical in our tools. And that caveat is the thing to recognize, is that not all softwares can actually support each of the workflows. So, you know, not everybody can do bridge design, not everybody can do highway design, not everyone can do railway design. So there is still an obligation on the users to pick the right tools for the job and not kind of consider that IFC is some sort of magic bullet to resolve all issues. But I did mention in the section that I was covering that the current MVD project is underway, and that is to deliver at least MVDs for known clear exchanges. And when people adopt IFC in industry, they should use those appropriate MVDs for the required exchange. If an MVD doesn't exist to support a required exchange, then that's something that please do come back to us and say that we need an exchange that supports. And I'll say something that might actually be covered, like cost management. We are looking at costs, but it might be that you're unable to deliver the required exchange. So, you know, we do reach out to the community to ask us of where there are gaps. But please make sure you use the right technologies, the modeling applications in the first instance, and use the correct MVD when exchanging to a subsequent software or as a handover to another party. And final comment is, in terms of the question, the whole purpose of the MVD work and the subsequent certification is to give confidence to the user community that there are tools out there that support the approved exchanges that are certified by buildingSMART. So as an InfraRoom, we are absolutely working with the software community to ensure that there are useful exchanges and that they can be provisioned in suitable softwares.
That's great. Thank you, Marek. Thank you, Jim. Very comprehensive answer to that particular set of questions. There's another one that's just come in from Hiromasa. Thank you for your question, Hiromasa. Integration of BIM and GIS is very important. What is the current situation on IDBE? What do we plan to do with IDBE this year? Jim, that sounds like one for you. I'll just unmute you, Jim. You're muted at the moment.
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry, Hero. Yes, I think that one's directed at me, and it's a very important question. I've had a couple of conversations so far this year with Castaing, who is the other half of the IDBE leadership team, so to speak. Castaing representing OGC and I representing buildingSMART. We haven't really locked anything down for this year, except that there is an ongoing commitment, as I said earlier. It's certainly a very important topic, but I don't really have any explicit answer. Of course, the work in geotechnics, which I know you're involved in, is certainly an important part of that picture. But IDB, as in Castaing and myself, haven't really been directly involved in that, except in the early days. So I can't really give you much more of an answer than that. But it's certainly still on our agenda.
That's great. Thank you, Jim. Edgar has picked up on the discussion we had a moment ago about development of IFC and then ways to actually use IFC in the industry. He was saying, why always this discussion about IFC doesn't do X, Y, Z, for example. If you look at Revit, MEP elements are much less well defined than an IFC. He explains that he's a former buildings engineer. I think Sergei has actually partly addressed this. Thank you, Sergei, where he says we will always have various software tools that focus on a particular user, and hence there will never be one software to rule them all. Very true. I don't know if anyone in the steering committee wishes to add anything to that particular exchange.
I guess just from the software perspective, again, it's back to my point about do use the modeling tools that you need to fulfill a modeling obligation, but also if there is data exchange requirement, to make sure you can fulfill that either directly within the software or by extending the attribution to meet the IFC capability. But again, there is I certainly come across many situations where the expectation is very different to the reality, and the expectation might be that the software can do everything without any input from the users. So as users, you also have an obligation to make sure you complete potential attribution or augment what's been provisioned from a model exchange. Again, to fulfill a requirement from a downstream other user, and particularly in the UK, I think it was mentioned earlier that there is a growing demand on information requirements, and certainly as we see a maturity in the client side defining more and more exchange information requirements, then the need to plan the modeling tools you're going to use and how you will meet the data delivery obligations is more and more a focus for teams. So get out your ISO 19650 standards and do your master information delivery plans and your task information delivery plans to pick the right tools, and also the other methods you need to deliver according to those expectations or requirements from your customers.
Thank you, Marek. Thank you for those comments. I think this is the final comment or question that we have in. Richard was responding to I think what we just discussed and the comments that were raised earlier. Excellent question regarding making standards easy to use. Creation of user guides and assistance with implementation is a major focus for buildingSMART this year. Check out yesterday's presentations on the opening day of the summit for reference on this. The infrastructure room roadmap workshops provide valuable and critical input to this. Yes, that's very true. We'll certainly pick up and explore some of this in the feedback from the roadmap workshops and the updates to the infrastructure room roadmap that will be made as a result of that activity. That is. Go on, Jim. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, I just want to jump in quickly on that one too. The issues being raised here are very, very complex. It's important that we understand that IFC is a very complex and broad standard, and we've just added to that complexity very dramatically by adding infrastructure. And so it becomes very important that buildingSMART go to the next stage, which is processing ongoing at the moment, about defining what we call MVD, model view definitions, which allow you to specify what information is required for various different domain use cases. And when it really comes down to it, if you're talking about modeling a pipe, how do you actually model a pipe? Because within IFC standard, there are different ways of representing the geometry of a pipe, not to mention all its semantic characteristics and so on. So we need to be very diligent, and there's a lot of work to be done within the technical space in buildingSMART in order to address those complexities and start to define use cases, define the concept templates work so that we can define how various types of elements are to be represented in different contexts. And that's very important. Thanks, John.
Yep.
Just want to make that point.
Thanks, Jim. No, good point. Well made. We have no other comments or questions at this point. So I'm just going to remind everybody of the content of the excellent presentation that we've just had from the Infrastructure Room Steering Committee members who have been with us today. I'd like to thank you all for the presentations that you've just made. And as Tiina said at the introduction, there are further sessions both later today and later in the week, which will look at the subject of infrastructure. So please do join us for those later sessions by accessing the agenda in the Hopin platform at this BSI Summit. But thank you very much for your attendance today. Thank you to all our speakers. Speak and see you all again soon. Goodbye.